Dr. Campbell Grizzle is a researcher, behavior change communication specialist, and registered pharmacist with over 40 years experience in the pharmaceutical industry. After several years in the private sector, she re-entered the public sector as Director of Information and Research at the Jamaican National Council of Drug Abuse. She was Dean of the College of Health Sciences from 2011 to 2016. And again, just to say that if you have any questions for Dr. Campbell Grizzle while she's speaking, please put them in the chat. We'll pick them up after the session, and we'll see if we've got time for a quick Q&A there. Dr. Campbell Grizzle, welcome to Play Talk Change. It's wonderful to have you here. I'm going to hand over to you now and allow you to deliver your presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Nick. To my team, Ni3 team here in Jamaica, who have been doing a fabulous job and who extended the invitation to me to be here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. And you saw a video that showed you my beautiful country and also explained that there's an underbelly that's deeply rooted in the culture when it pertains to child sexual abuse. I'm particularly concerned about the children with disabilities, and their abuse sometimes is very deeply hidden, and it's deeply hidden in the culture of the country. So thank you very much. I'm about to start my presentation in terms of the video, the PowerPoint slides, and so permit me to share my screen. From the top. Yes. Thank you again. I have coined this talk in terms of the theme of your conference, which is Play, Talk, Change. And I dedicate the talk to the children in Jamaica who have died tragically. And they are memorialized in the Secret Gardens, downtown Kingston. What's there is their names, their ages, and the day on which they died. And it's something to visit, because it's a powerful reminder of lives lost. In terms of Jamaica, about every year we lose about 50 children tragically, violent deaths, murders, and so on. And I'm not counting those who have suicidal ideation, because many of them do survive, but the numbers are high and worrisome. And all other children who find themselves in situations of abuse, mostly unreported, I dedicate this talk to them. And I had to interpret your topic, Play, Talk, and Change. And as a behavior change specialist, you know, we thrive on diagrams to represent how we think and how to express how we see a topic. And so you have a circle that is porous. That means the environment comes in and out of the circle in which we have our theme, so that it's not a completely locked off version and the world keeps coming in and out. Play to me means engagement and exposure. And I believe that it brings to our children a world that they may not have seen, have not been exposed to. And you cannot be really what you cannot see and understand. And the engagement and exposure leads to talk, which is dialogue, literacy sharing, consensus building. And so you create a zone for your children, in this case, because we're talking about child sexual abuse, to feel that they can report to someone, speak to someone, and have a confidential, safe space that they can identify. So through talking, you develop dialogue and trust, and then change, which is really what we would like to see in Jamaica in terms of change of our attitudes and behaviors towards child sexual abuse. And through talk, we share knowledge. We hope to change mental disposition and a shift in attitude. The social norming which supports the behavior, and especially the culture that's embedded there. We want to shake that up, to disrupt that, and have people thinking and moving in a different direction. Ultimately, we try to arrive at behavior change. So that's just my brief explanation of how I interpreted your topic. And so my playbook takes us through the landscape, some theoretical mentions, the data, primarily from the Ni3 study um, that was released recently, the intervention, which is, of course, our pro-social game, Gabby, and how we are going to move forward. So very quickly then, to describe the Jamaican landscape, it is to say that child sexual abuse is pervasive, it is stubborn, it is not a phenomenon. It really is a practice within the country that has persisted for a long time. Deeply interested in many cultural ideas, both social implications and health implications. We describe physical, verbal, and emotional abuse as parts of child sexual abuse. Contact and non-contact abuse are dominant features. Between January and October 2018, 2,500 cases of child sexual abuse were reported to the Child Protection and Family Services agencies. And my information is largely taken from the Ni3 study of 2010. It affects you for a lifetime. So far this year, we have lost about 30 children who have been tragically killed in crossfire in terms of gun battles, or just killed like family reprisals, and the children are victims as well. It's not a pretty picture where that is concerned. From Ni3 study, it affects you for a lifetime. And indeed, the study we did in Jamaica in 2017, Hamilton, Grizzle, and Lewis were the investigators. We concur. Low socioeconomic status, negative parental factors, child shifting. That is the practice of sending children to stay with friends for extended periods of time, and prior victimization. Among the low socioeconomic factors were issues concerned with financial difficulties, living in inner cities or disadvantaged communities, substandard living arrangements, several family members living in one room, lack of adequate supervision, and poor parent-child relationships were identified as some of the negative parental factors which contributed to sexual abuse. I don't want to stereotype what we call inner city communities in Jamaica at all. That is primarily where the poor reside, because we have had some real stars who have come up against the odds and have come to national prominence. Some of them are actually some of the athletes you saw on the video before. The omerta effect is something that bedevils us in Jamaica in terms of reporting. There is really a code of silence that drives adult non-reporting, and even children non-reporting, and lack of transparency. The culture says inform of your dead, means that if you inform, you are to die. And that therefore now leads to an omerta effect, the silence. And of course, in Jamaica, we say, enough for my business. And I give a shout out to the Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, Jamaica, who in the parliament of the land on our feet declared we have to start minding other people's business. That's what she said, because she understands the culture and the problem that we have with the inform of a dead culture and the statement enough of my business. It affects you for a lifetime. Child sexual abuse, and this is again coming from the study, is associated with adverse outcomes that are not just experienced over a short term, but may persist throughout the survivor's life. And female survivors state that it affects their psychological functioning, interpersonal relations, academic and occupational function, and inappropriate behaviors. And let me haste to say that male children are also abused. Not in the numbers that it means females are abused, but males are also abused. Emotional distress is a result. And so they have suicidal thoughts or ideation, self-harm behaviors, and poor self-esteem. And they also have problems with intimate relations, sexual functioning, and parenting. And in some survivors, in externalizing behaviors, such as externalized behaviors such as substance abuse, stealing, and gambling. This is so very true and mimics some of the other challenges that our children face that lean them towards externalizing some negative, very negative behaviors. Protective factors, and we must, since we give the negative, must give that there is a possibility for protection or helping children to survive. So, without a doubt, effective and vigilant parenting. In Jamaicans say, oh, the parents are fast and a busybody and so on. Don't worry about that tagline. You have to know where your children are, know their friends, know what they are doing. You have to have children who are taught how to report sexual advances. And they must have somebody to whom they can report. Because although in Jamaica, from the video you see, we have all of the structural pieces to do with law and agencies and so on. Part of the problem is trust of the actors in the social setting, and in fact the resources of those people to respond to what is being reported to them. Children who know their rights, and this is very important. Children in Jamaica, sometimes they are raised to say you are to be seen and not heard. And so that moves against any kind of effort to get them to report certain things. They keep quiet. And when they keep quiet, we say they're well behaved. Parents that encourage healthy social reactions by modeling it themselves. You can't encourage it and not modeling that kind of interaction. Cultural norms. We have to have those norms that build abhorrence to abuse. Zero tolerance, as we say, in terms of strong legislation that protects children and effective monitoring service. And I give kudos to the government of Jamaica. They have started this regime of legislation. What they have to beef up now is the compliance, monitoring, and giving the people resources to get the job done. So what are we doing to our children? And what are we going to do about the problem of child sexual abuse? And really, I pause to ask the question, do we know what we are going to do? Do we have a plan of what we are going to do? And how are we going to bring the communities? Because no matter what the government does, if the communities are not a part of the solution, it really, really, really is a very limited, top-heavy strategy. So what are we going to do as we plan to intervene in this child sexual abuse practice that is part of our underbelly here in Jamaica? And we have guidance. Admittedly, many of these theories were not developed in Jamaica, but they have application. and I can just whip through them as I explained to you how they can guide us towards some kind of intervention and action. And very quickly, I think we are all familiar with stages of change. I'm not going to do a tutorial on it, but it really speaks about the different stages that people go through in facing some problem. Their pre-contemplation, when they are not aware of what the problem is, then they begin to contemplate it. Then they start to prepare themselves. Then they move to decision, determination, action, and maintenance. But I have presented a linear process. It is not. It is really a circular process where people weave in and weave out the different stages. But the point of it is that in terms of your intervention, if you understand where your audience is, what stage they're at, you can prepare a more appropriate intervention to help them to deal with the problem. So you have to understand internally where your audience is. Then plan behavior, which gives us a clue. If you're in your studies and in your surveys, people state that they intend to seek behavior. They're and help. Sorry, they're open to it. It tells you that along with your understanding of how they believe that they have self-agency, which is kind of perceived control, they are powerful, they are able, their attitudes, the norms in which that surround them, and that indeed they recognize the problem. If you have all of that information and they declare that they would like to seek for help, you know that you can do something there, whether some, some videos or something to help them to further explore the problem. And of course, the person-to-person reaction when they really do want to get help. And of course, a very old theory, social learning theory, first postulated by Bandura, where he talks about attitudes, intentions, again, and subjective norms. If you study these, and indeed, if you can kind of get one to shift in terms of the equilibrium, you have a good chance of disrupting a system, moving it forward, getting some kind of behavior. What we want is positive behavior, and then you can look forward to some results that you can measure. But SLT is much more than what I'm saying, right? Because it speaks of the relationships between all of these elements, and how if you shake one, you can shake the other. And so you can at least target one thing in this line here, and build on the self-efficacy. You can move the behavior in the appropriate direction, and you can anticipate the results in the long run. And just to show you a little bit about Rogers, his theory speaks a lot about media as well, and how to use media, when to use media when it's appropriate. But an important piece of this is to let you know that Rogers postulated that you have the early adopters, the innovators, the early adopters. Then there's a break. There's what he calls the chasm. And then you have early majority who will adopt the change. Then you have the late majority, and you will have a small amount of laggards, just 16% he postulated. Do not forget the laggards. They have many of them can be powerful people in a community, and they have the potential to break or make. So you have a job of business to try to at least convert some of them or nullify their efforts. And then I come finally to culture, because when you see the graph that the Ni3 people have developed, culture is important in this business of child sexual abuse. To communicate effectively, Stuart Hall says, requires the sharing of cultural codes. We got to understand one another. Meaning is then produced and exchanged within a culture. And language, of course, is used to interpret conceptual maps, and a lack of cultural equivalence mitigates against the adoption of shared meaning. So Gabby has got to be culturally relevant and resonate with the audience for which it is intended. And cultural considerations are important. I would say are superlatively important in the process of transmission ideas and practice in the conveyance of meaning. And therefore, transcultural impact is to be carefully considered or studied when you are going to use media from one culture across to the other. You really have to decide what you are going to do. Jamaica is big on myths, and there are a lot of health myths and social myths about child sexual abuse in this country. Um, some of the old men say when they are old and wanted to improve their vigor, they can have they can have touching or having sex with young, sometimes virgins, and sometimes young children. Um, the idea that young children are not really people with the right to defend themselves, and so the power dynamic plays, and so young children are abused, and children are abused. And sometimes when the child does report, the adult will say, "Shut up your mouth. You're a picnic. Stop talk." That because children are not supposed to have a voice in our culture. That's changing, and they're really pushing the rights of the child here now. This is from Ni3, and as I told you, the cultural factors are there, both the norms and the myths that are central to child sexual abuse. They've captured it there as in the middle of the huddle of factors that affect and with the potential therefore to mitigate, if you look at the other way, child sexual abuse. Parental factors, lack of adequate supervision. Children are left alone. We call them children living alone because the parent is either abroad earning money or they're in the working in the tourism area and they're in the heights of living in the hills of Clarendon. The children are in a big yard with other people looking out for them. Poor parental relationship and abandonment of parental responsibilities. The child shifting, which we spoke about, sending your child away to a relative that you think you can trust for a long period of time so you can get yourself together. Socioeconomic factors, financial challenges. We know this in terms of parents sending their children to a don, for example, for some sexual exploitation because the don will pay them and protect them in the community. Disadvantaged communities where you live in a ghetto area or so on. Again, I want to just say that I don't stereotype people because I know people who come from ghettos who are doing exceedingly well today as role models to other people. Inadequate living accommodation, and of course, prior victimization. If you're a victim yourself, it is very um, probable that you will also be a perpetrator as well. So this is coming from the Ni3 project, and it aligns very well with how I am thinking about this business of play, talk, change, and the factors, the web of factors that drive sexual abuse, child sexual abuse. So what are we doing to our children? And this is two. We are abusing them. We are negatively impacting their lives. We are silent when you speak out. And we are not providing adequate restorative and protective resources to take care of them. This may be due to the fact that Jamaica is not a rich country by any strength of length of the imagination, and we just simply do not have the resources. And maybe we are not prioritizing those resources in ways that we should. And as we are facing COVID-19 now, where the children are locked in with some of their abusers, you can imagine what the numbers will be like when we go back in and interrogate post COVID-19. So moving forward, we think then that play, talk, and change is a recipe for moving forward. The pro-social game is a part of it, but pro-social game is located in the context of other things going on in the society that support the game. And so I commend the Ni3 team here for them to try to get their findings in policy to the government, to the relevant ministers of government, and the NGOs who will have to motivate and get the work and do the implementation going forward. They recognize that the pro-social game is not enough. Is not enough to take on the huge problem that we have here in Jamaica. So I'm coming to an end of my short talk, just to say the serious game, and you saw it on the video before my talk now. There are identifiable aspects of perpetrator action, the basis of their power, their cunning, and their subterfuge. The game reveals the vulnerability of the victims who are staying for life. In my opinion, it is knowledge building and awareness raising. It is a dialogue starter. It is culturally relevant and is digitally powerful and attractive. And it has all the elements that can lead to shifts in attitudes along with other interventions. And what else can we do? We have some good core cultural moorings in Jamaica that support our best behaviors and our best dangers. It takes a village to raise a child. It is not uncommon in Jamaica for a village to adopt a child or to help a parent with a child because the parent needs help. And the person doesn't have to be a relative of yours. It's just a child in the village. Especially in rural Jamaica, this continues a lot. They'll put together to buy the school uniform, the clothes, and to feed the child as a community. Parents and monitors must monitor their children or wards. We have to train our children to share any advances or touching of their bodies that make them uncomfortable. Parents and guardians, you see, I'm stressing these people, they need training on how to discipline their children and how to listen to them. We need to mind other people's business in a good way. And social policy should be mindful of the need to keep our children safe in all strata of society. We are not going to leave any child behind. I had the privilege of writing the foreword for the Jamaican study, and it was such a powerful study, so beautifully written, that it evoked in me some emotions that I tried to express in the foreword. So I said, in terms of a quote, it leaves me with the haunting images of helpless children suffering and shuddering in silence, in fear of recrimination from family and society, as they endure the maltreatment of a lifetime, alone and vulnerable like lambs to the slaughter. And here I plug the study, and I really encourage people to read it because it's not difficult to read, and yet it gives you all the facts. And I think, and I know the Ni3 team in Jamaica has been circulating it to government offices, government ministers. And in fact, we are hoping that they will get a chance to address the special committee that is now convened on sexual abuse within the Parliament of Jamaica. We are holding out hope that they will get their chance to present their findings. So this is me. I am available. You can contact me. I am at the University of Technology, where Ni3 is housed. I'm a member of the International Advisor Group of Ni3, and I'm an associate professor at the College of Health Sciences. So without further ado, I will take any questions that you have, or I hand over to the moderator, Nick.
Thank you so much for that that wonderful presentation, and for sharing those really stark insights into the extent and the prevalence of this problem in Jamaica. And thank you also for everything that you're doing, that the team are doing, I know, to promote this work. And I couldn't agree more with what Dr. Campbell Grizzle there has said. It is a brilliant report. It's available on our website. It affects you for a lifetime. So if you go to www.not3.org, click on the country pages, go to the Jamaica section. It's within there in the resources. It's really accessible. It's really, really worth going on and having a read of that. Questions that we've had a few questions in the chat. One of the ones that came through was in the context of a discussion about emotional abuse, and we've had a question from Dorothy Graham about what mechanisms are in place to detect emotional abuse, and whether you think that's something which is often overlooked in our conversations about child abuse.
I mostly speak with persons who are psychologists, and they who will be caregivers are very aware of it, because the children are usually referred to somebody with psychological training, and they're aware of it. But in terms of the culture, and I will come back to that, and the ordinary man in the street, he is not really thinking about emotional abuse. So the trained professionals will be cognizant of it and will try to suss it out in the conversation. But the ordinary man in the street, he doesn't understand that what he may be doing may have that kind of lagging emotional abuse and will affect the person for a lifetime. So yes, so there's a kind of dichotomy in terms of the formal system. Psychologists are aware, but in the culture where you really do want to dig down and make it matter, that's where the struggle will be, and that's where we have to go with the prevention program. So it's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. We don't have a perfect answer in my country at all.
Thank you for answering that.
Yes.
I'm gonna run the risk of trying to sound like I know what I'm talking about here, but I was very, very interested in the slide you showed about Roger's diffusion of innovation, and you spoke about how it's important to make sure that the laggards within that are kind of brought through on any change that makes. But I was also interested in the idea of that chasm, the gap between the early adopters of a change and it going into the mainstream. I wondered if you had any thoughts on how to kind of push the change of attitudes through that chasm.
Well, I tell you, I've tried some things, but it has not worked. In Jamaica, we said time longer than rope. It is a matter of timing. It is sometimes one of our Jamaican people wrote this book. Well, you probably don't realize, but he's of Jamaican ancestors. The Tipping Point. And what he says is that he doesn't know when an innovation will take off, at what happens. But this usually start out very slowly, and then something happens in the ether that actually pushes it. Maybe some child dies or something happens, and people start buzzing and talking. You get a few other people joining and say, but yes, and so you start building up support. The reason I stress the laggards is that in that eventuality of moving forward, even chasm notwithstanding, the laggards in our communities, the laggards are usually sometimes some very important voices. And so I'm saying to the planners, you have got to take stock of them. Don't just push them aside, because they can do real damage. So you have to find a way either to convince them or strategically negate them. It's one or the two. Yes, well, so the chasm closes in terms of when something happens usually, and it maybe as a strategic person, you can plan to make something happen. You can plan to make something happen or take advantage of something in the society that's happening, and make it relevant to your innovation. Because in Jamaica, the idea that we will not have child sexual abuse is an innovation, because it's not a phenomenon, it's a practice. You see? It's something we have been doing for years. It's like voices in our blood that tell us, coming down through eons, that this is the way what we should do.
Thank you. And I know that through our work in Jamaica and our work globally on this issue, that we're hoping that we're doing our bit to close that chasm and to make that change, to force that realization through. You mentioned at one point in your presentation about legislation in Jamaica starting to move in the right direction, for there starting to be the legal mechanisms put in place. And you talked about the hoping that the resources followed. I just wondered if you had any thoughts on what resources you think this issue needs in Jamaica, and what you'd like to see implemented in a practical sense.
We have excellent psychologists. We need more. The police do a big fair share of the work on the first call. They need to be trained, because they're coming from the force with a kind of orientation. And I'm not saying casting aspersions of those who are involved now, but I'm saying even before the person may go to the police station, before they're referred to the unit, what happens when they get there before they're referred will make a difference. So the police force outside of the unit needs to have some sensitivity training, so they don't turn away at somebody who has been victimized. Not the unit itself, although the unit can do with training. I also am big on community. I don't think government can do it alone. And I believe, coming out of Gabby, I believe that one of the things that we have to do is to get our NGOs involved, because they will carry the work in their, you have different, Jamaica is full of NGOs with different, things that they focus on. We have to embed it within the NGOs so it becomes a part of their programming, because that carries the work. And you have NGOs that are national, and you have some that just work in a community. And that is where we have to dig down now with the Ni3 program in Jamaica. Not only the government, but we have to get the NGOs who carry the work, and then the wider community, the fishers and the market people and all of them. The consciousness has got to be raised so that they too can play a part in ensuring that when they see a child suffering, they know that they must report it. It must be their business, as the minister is saying.
Thank you. I think so much of what you said there as well about making sure that people in those organizations like the police receive the training that they need. I mean, those are things that sound so appropriate to all of the countries where we're working as well. So thank you for that. And it kind of picks up at the end on something that's come up in the chat, which is that the line about minding each other's business is something that's really resonated with people, and that really ties into that idea of community. So thank you for that. I have got one last question, if you've got time to share one last answer with us. Thank you very much. Which is, we've got a lot of young people attending here, and quite an international young audience who've joined us today. And I just wondered if you had a brief closing message for all the young people who are here about what their role could be in bringing about the change that they'd like to see.
Yes, I would like to share with them, in my view, they are peers to many of the young people who are actually in some difficult situations. And a peer is a powerful motivator and a powerful agent for change. Powerful change agent. Be change agents for good. Care about the plight of your brother or your sister or your friend who you may notice something, and they pull them out to find out what's going on. Because in unsuspecting places, there are children who are being abused. It's not a matter of poor children. Some wealthy homes, the children are being abused. And so we as peers, or you as peers, need to use that peer status, and it is a status for good, to extend the efforts to carry a message and to translate it into the knowledge of your peers that they understand what the problem is. But first of all, you have to educate yourself on the issue. So you're not spreading foolishness. You know, educate yourself on the issue first. Spend time studying and understanding the issue, and then you use your power as peer to really influence others. Because influence and persuasion are critical in the business of trying to help people to move away from a situation and to seek help.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much, Francina. That's a very powerful message for all the young people who are watching as well, about being peers and being engaged and seeing the ways in which their power as a peer can be used for good. Dr. Campbell, Grizzle, thank you so much for joining us at Play Talk Change. It's been a real pleasure to have you here, and thank you for taking our questions as well.
It was my pleasure. And to the Ni3 team Jamaica, big up. Big up.
Thank you very much.
All right. Good.